was always the Jags.
It was always the Jags.
It was always the Jags.
Always the Jags.
Welcome into Always the Jags. We, of course, are your podcast for all things Jacksonville, all things Jaguars, all things Duval. It's a little bit different. It's a little bit difficult to be in high spirits today. Really of any day. I apologize again. I've been out of town for a couple of weeks, so I wasn't able to get on to record these past few episodes. In case you were wondering, the Jaguars lost. I know it's shocking. Can't really believe it. But I'm going to try to stay on topic for each one. So we'll start with the Lions game. Not much to say there. I thought it was going to be bad. Didn't realize it was going to be that bad. And I think it's completely different. Like if we were having a good season or an okay season, or like, let's say Trevor was knocked out before the season even started, I think that game looks completely different, right? Because like it's a bad loss, but the narrative will be like, well, Trevor Lawrence is out for the season. You know what I mean? Like the Jaguars can't do much without your franchise quarterback. But we were losing games with our franchise quarterback before this. And that's why the loss hurts so, why it just sheds more light on how bad of a team you are. And I'd like to just take a second because like I don't understand why the Jaguars have to operate like this in a way. Like the way the franchise has to operate is as if people that are here are only here out of necessity. And I'll explain that. So in 2019, we drafted Gardner Minshew in the 6th round to be a backup quarterback to Nick Foles. He ended up being pretty good, and he ended up, outplaying Nick Foles. And then Gardner Minshew returned to the lineup, still couldn't do enough, and the Jaguars, missed the playoffs. But it allowed the Jaguars to trade Nick Foles and let Gardner Minshew be the starter for 2020. They were like, we're going to give him a shot at being the starter, see if he can be our franchise quarterback that we ended up drafting. Of course, 2020, we all know how that season went. Extremely, extremely poorly. And then flash forward to 2021, where we have the number 1 overall pick. We're going to get Trevor Lawrence, who's supposed to be God's gift to quarterbacks. And now, for some reason, like Urban Meyer, and I don't know if it was Urban Meyer's fault, but Urban Meyer had like a competition between Gardner Minshew and Trevor Lawrence. And then when Trevor Lawrence went out, Gardner Minshew was traded for a 6th round pick, and they signed CJ Stroud. And here's my question. Because Gardner Minshew is still, I think, the best backup quarterback in the league. Like, and I think last year, if we put him in while Trevor was hurt, like I said, we didn't have enough faith in not CJ Stroud, sorry. Earlier I said CJ Stroud. I meant CJ Beathard. We didn't have enough faith in CJ Beathard to put him in. So we ended up going with Lawrence, even though he was hurt. But Gardner Minshew could have won some of those games. I can't tell you exactly which one because our defense gave a lot against the Bengals, and then against the Browns, we're going against their backup quarterback. So again, it's hard to know. But again, a healthy Gardner Minshew is better than an injured Trevor Lawrence. So anyway, so we ended up trading Gardner Minshew for like a 6th round pick to the Eagles, where he went as a backup, won a couple of games, and then got a nice deal with the Indianapolis Colts to back up Richardson. Then he started all that year, and now he went to compete with the Raiders. So he's been bouncing around the league as a bridge/backup quarterback. Okay, now let's compare ourselves to another team in the same division, right? Let's compare ourselves to the Texans. So in 2021, the Texans draft Davis Mills, who seems like this was after the whole Deshaun Watson debacle. And obviously, most people were like, Davis Mills is not their quarterback of the future. They just drafted him to have someone to play. But then they also signed Tyrod Taylor. So, and then Davis Mills goes on to beat us twice. So, our rookie quarterback going head to head against Trevor Lawrence beats him in 2021, beats him again in 2022, and then Trevor finally beats him at the end of 2022. I don't even know if Davis Mills was playing in that game, but either way, so we lose to them twice, right? Come 2023, now CJ Stroud is drafted by the Texans. And I just noted, and turns out, so CJ Stroud is drafted by the Texans to be their franchise quarterback, number 2 overall. And then the Texans give Davis Mills a decent deal to come back as their backup. A guy who started for them for the past 2 years, had a chance to prove himself to be the guy. He didn't, and ended up staying on as backup. Yet we couldn't do the same thing with Gardner Minshew. That's the part that doesn't make sense to me, right? Like, and it's like, why does Jacksonville have to be the franchise that's like you got to escape from? You know what I mean? Because Gardner Minshew, we traded him away in 2021. He could have backed up Trevor in 2021 and 2022, kept him for his full rookie deal because he had to be here all 4 years, and he could either go hit free agency if he wanted to, or we could have offered him a nice deal to stay as our backup. Same thing here. Like Davis Mills is probably going to stay in Houston for a long time as their backup, even though he has 2 years of starting experience and could probably start for a couple of teams out there. After all, he knows how to throw the football. I mean, he's got some skill. So that's the part that I don't get, right? Because Mac Jones, like I think Gardner Minshew is better than Mac Jones. Not to mention, it might have cost us a little bit more in backup money, I guess. But we wouldn't have had to trade a 6th-round pick for Mac Jones. And more importantly, those games when Trevor was hurt last year, Gardner Minshew could have stepped in and delivered the offense in a fine manner, right? And we could have kept winning. So now here we are, and again, Gardner Minshew versus the Lions, probably not going to be very different, right? The Lions are a Super Bowl team. All my family is from Detroit, so I can say if there's any team that I'd want to lambaste us in the NFL, I'd say it's the Lions. And again, not to, Mac Jones is a great story, hometown kid coming back. There are some things about his character I didn't really like when he was playing in the NFL. He made a couple of like dirty tackles, and there are some things like just based upon his personality. But all of that aside, it's like, can you hold down the fort when the quarterback's gone, when the quarterback's hurt? And so, we'll get into what happened yesterday. We'll get into what happened over Sunday in the next episode. But for right now, it's like just kind of reflect on that. Like, would you like to have Gardner Minshew as your backup quarterback for the past 2 or 3 years, and maybe he'd be coming back on for another year this year if we gave him a modest deal? And it's like, why can't we do that? Why is that not an option? Why is that okay if Trevor Lawrence and Gardner Minshew are competing for the starting role and Trevor wins? Okay, now Gardner's got to go to Philadelphia. Why? He's a super cheap, super talented backup quarterback. He went to Philly to be a backup quarterback. It makes no sense. And it's like, you want the mentorship of CJ Beathard. CJ Beathard was drafted in 2017. He's not like, he's got 2 more years of maybe veteran experience than Gardner Minshew. He's not like this old, wise, grizzled, like he was drafted in 2017. What are we doing? And the move, I think, was criticized at the time. To me, it's like, if you could have gotten a 3rd or a 4th for him, sure. And I think he deserved the chance to go start somewhere else. Like, I thought he would have been fine on the Broncos. But if you're offering me a 6th, no, I'm keeping him. And maybe even if you were offering a 3rd, it might have been better just to keep him because he's talented, he's on your team, and he's a backup quarterback. And you ended up, it's not like you sent him somewhere to start. That was my thing. Like, my whole thing was like, okay, if we got to trade him, that's because he deserves to start somewhere else. He didn't. He went somewhere else and became the backup quarterback again. And he was the 3rd string backup quarterback, if I'm not mistaken, in Philly, because they already had 2. They had Jalen Hurts and then someone else right after him. I can't remember who it was. So I say all that on this rant. We'll have to move on. Obviously our season is sunk. Um, Move on to next year. I mean, there are some. If there's anything you can take away from this, like, yes, we got beat down by the Lions, we got beat down by the Bills, and we kind of got beat down by the Bears. Those are some bad beat downs. But it's not like we have holes all over our roster, and it's not just like there are some games you win by one score and you didn't really have a chance to go win. The Vikings game was kind of like that. We weren't really in a position to go win it. But every other game this year that we've played, we were in a position to win it. It didn't come down to the last drive and then the team, like, no one was kneeling, basically. It was every single drive counted. Every single drive, it went all the way to the final second. And so, like, I'm not gonna say the talent is there, because I think the Jaguars overestimated the talent in some spots and underestimated it in others. But a few key decisions, and obviously some scheme and personnel changes, um, could make the difference between us being terrible this year and feasible next year. I mean, to me, the best example is the Chargers, right? Like, the Chargers objectively got worse over the offseason, because what did they do? They got rid of Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, who all were, relatively overpaid, but they traded all of them away. Quentin Johnson, who hadn't proved anything as a rookie, was their starting receiver. They waited to the fifth round to the second round, sorry, to draft another one in Lag McConkey. And then they signed J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards to modest deals in free agency and got that big offensive tackle Joe Alt on their line. They're way better this year than they were last year. Look at their defense. I mean, Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack are both still there. Joey Bosa was hurt a lot of last year, so that makes a difference. But it's like, what changed on the Chargers other than coaching? Right? And that's the question you kind of got to start asking. It's like, you don't want to blame everything on the coaching, but clearly it makes a difference, because you look at them last year and you look at them now. And it's like, well, what changed other than coaching on the Chargers? Because objectively, they got worse. They didn't draft anybody. They drafted one offensive lineman. Are you saying me Joe Alt turned the team from 5-12 into playoff contenders? One offensive tackle? Or was it the style that Jim Harbaugh runs and what he brought to the team? So I say all that to say, yeah, obviously there will be changes coming. I think Doug is I still think Doug is a good coach. He's just too loyal to his coordinators when they're not getting it done. And again, I think Press Taylor is very invested in the scheme, and he's not willing to adjust it to fit either his personnel and make them better, or adjust it to the changing times of the NFL and defenses keening up on what you're going to do. And the same for Ryan Nielsen. He's kind of stuck in his ways, doesn't want to adjust his scheme for personnel based upon who we actually have to play the scheme. Like, to me, a good coordinator is not one that says, I run press man every single time, or like, I have a press man scheme. The best coordinators evaluate what your players are and what they can do, and you put them in the best position to succeed. That's what good coordinators do. If this guy is really good at zone, but not good at press man, okay, he's going to play a lot of zone. How is he going to play second cornerback, third? Like, what in my system works? Do I have any press man zone concepts? Where's the best spot for everyone to be? And I'm just going to put someone somewhere and say, hey, go play press man. I know you're not good at it, but I'm going to coach you to be better at it. Like, it doesn't work that way. Guys are good at what they're good at. And instead of coaching them to do it a way that they're not used to or they're not good at, be like, here's how you do it in this scheme. Here's how you play press man in my scheme. So, obviously, I think he's going to make it to the end of the season, because I think Shad Khan doesn't see a point in firing him in the middle of the season. You don't get a head start in anything, but it's going to happen. And for any more, I mean, everyone's clamoring for Ben Johnson for our head coach. Um, I'm down as long as he. I don't know who I'd want. Like, I prefer for a former coach to come in as our offensive coordinator as well, but I think Ben Johnson's probably going to bring his own guy if he gets the head coaching position. And for defensive coordinator, Robert Saleh is my number one pick. I wish we got Brian Flores last year, but I would love to bring in Robert Saleh. That would be home run. That would be Jaguars, not Jaguaring. So, let me know your thoughts about the thrashing against the Lions. Let me know if you think the Jaguars should have kept Gardner Minshew after all of this, now that we have Mac Jones and everything. And I honestly, I think both players are about the same, I don't think one is so significantly better than the other. Um, it just feels like a move that didn't need to be made. So again, let me know your thoughts. And it was always the Jags, even when it's not.